I'm going to get right to it because I could probably speak for an hour or more on each one. Brinker Harding and I actually traveled around and met with various groups on the Affordable Housing Action Plan, and literally each one of those meetings went well over an hour. So I'm going to give you the 3-minute version, kind of the Affordable Action Plan. First of all, we were required by state statute to file a plan. The plan had to be filed by December 31st of 2022 by state statute. So thank you, Senator Wayne, for forcing us to do that. So what they did, and I have to say, I'm going to give a lot of credit to our planning department for the amount of work that they put into this. We did hire a consulting firm, RDG, who also put a lot of work into it. They did open houses everywhere. They did Zoom meetings. They presented to a whole list of associations. If you want a copy of it, it's 147 pages. You can email me and I will email you a copy. I did print one out so that I carry it around with me. But if you'd like a copy, I can provide you one. Just go to Omaha City Council, click my picture, it goes right to my email, so you don't even have to remember it. But the good thing about the plan is it's forcing us to look at affordable housing. Now, the biggest misnomer about affordable housing, and that's what I got a lot of emails on, people think affordable housing is Section 8. And affordable housing is not Section 8. Affordable housing is defined as it's affordable if you're spending 30% or less of your income per month on your mortgage or your rent. That's considered affordable housing. So what we want to do is make sure that we have enough stock of housing in our city so that anybody can live on 30% of their income going towards their housing. And of course, that's going to vary, right? I mean, if I've got one son that's making $90,000 a year, 30% of his income is going to be a lot more than my other son that's making $40,000 a year. So what we're trying to do is just make sure that there is a place where my son making $45,000 a year can afford housing. And so it is going to vary. And so we do need to make sure that we have that housing as our city grows. The issues that Brinker Harding and I had with the affordable housing plan, there's a lot of good stuff in here. I mean, how do you encourage developers to build affordable housing? Reduce the costs that the city charges to build the housing, such as some of the unreasonable, in my opinion, unreasonable ordinances in our code, to where if you're building in Douglas County, you have one code, you're building in the city of Omaha, you have a different code. So literally the two houses that you're building, you could have different codes going across the street. I mean, let's try and make it a little more easy for the builders to build. I think some of the requirements, especially in regards to pipes and things for plumbing, they've come a long way, and yet our codes are behind. And so and I'm not going to get into some of those details, but it's kind of an example of those are changes that we can make to make development more affordable for the developers who are building. So and what I see in this plan is there's a lot of things in this plan that would actually make development more expensive, which is actually completely counterproductive to the whole point of the plan, where we need to make sure that we increase our stock of affordable housing. When we talk about affordable housing, we also mean, houses that you can own as well. We really want to encourage home ownership. I mean, that's the best way for people to want to stay in Omaha is they invest in a home. It's also a way that they can increase, their equity and money to pass along to their kids. So we also want to make sure that we're not just doing a whole bunch of apartments. So it's got to be a mix. So what we also want to do is encourage a mix of housing. So maybe when you're on the eastern side of Omaha, it's going to be a little more dense. We want to encourage maybe more duplexes, condos, things like that. And to make sure that people have the ability to be able to afford housing too. So there's some things in this plan that would encourage, we have programs through the state and through nonprofits where you could get a mortgage at a lower interest rate than you'd be able to get at just your regular commercial bank, with the way they look at maybe your credit rating and things like that. So we can make mortgages a little more affordable for people. And again, once you get in a house and you own a house, I do think it encourages you to stay and just kind of, be better members of society. So those are the things that we're looking at in this. Brinker Harding and I actually asked for 4 minor things. And by the way, out of all of this, I probably had 100 changes I want to make, but we narrowed it down to 4 kind of things that we thought were really eye-catching, that we did not want to give people the expectation that we were going to pass. One of the things in here, kind of like in your textbooks in school, like your social studies book, they would have your required reading, and then they had these little colored boxes on the side, that was like extra FYI about something else. But those were usually your extra credit points, so you always wanted to make sure you read what was in the boxes. They had a box in here that says, well, other cities have done rent control. Okay, well, rent control isn't in the plan, but they put it in a little box. And so the average person that's reading the plan says, oh, you have rent control in here. And they said, well, that's not part of our plan. It was just an FYI. We were like, then take it out, right? Like, then erase the box. That was one of the things that Brinker and I wanted to change. They also had something in there, which, by the way, is near and dear to my heart. I do volunteer legal work for tenants in Douglas County. It's called the Tenant Assistance Program through the Nebraska Bar Association. We have free attorneys on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. There's no eviction court on Thursdays. And we have attorneys there that help the tenants. Usually, mostly what we're doing is we're negotiating with the landlords to maybe get them extra time, or an incentive would be if they're out of their apartment by a certain date and it's clean and they turn the keys in, then the landlord will dismiss the eviction so they don't have an eviction on their record, because that makes it almost impossible for them to rent somewhere else. So in a way, we're benefiting both landlords and tenants. Otherwise, the tenants may have just left it destroyed and it would cost the landlord more. So I do think that providing that service is good and important, and I will continue to donate my time to do that. However, in the plan, they basically had it mandated that the taxpayers should pay for lawyers and every person should be guaranteed a lawyer if you're in eviction court. I actually don't agree with that. I don't believe that we should have court-appointed counsel like we do in criminal court, because the amount of money that we spend on court-appointed criminal attorneys is astronomical. It's in the millions. You start adding tenants, we have sometimes over 65 cases just in one day that are being filed per day in Douglas County. So the cost to taxpayers is horrible. That was also in here, which that has absolutely nothing to do with affordable housing. Hi, glad you came. So that has zero to do with affordable housing. So that deals with preventing homelessness. And the mayor has a new director that actually that is her job. It's basically homelessness prevention. I'm all for that. It just shouldn't be in the plan and it shouldn't be mandated. So we were asking for some simple things to be removed. And by the way, the lawyers who actually practice it, who run the tenant assistance program, actually agreed with me. I mean, they were like, listen, we love our program too. We don't think this should be mandated and paid for. It would be really expensive. We will continue to go out and look for funding from some of the rich law firms. We ask them to donate and keep our project going, and we've had pretty good luck doing that. So Brinker and I just asked for some of those simple things. The council refused to eliminate any of them. And so Brinker, Harding, and I did vote no on the plan because we thought our requests and our amendments were extremely reasonable, especially because, I mean, we only had 4. And those are the things that we asked to be eliminated. I mean, some of the things they were asking for, I mean, I don't even think legally we could do it without the legislature changing the law. So that is why, although I think there's a whole lot of good stuff in here that we should pursue, such as reducing the cost, that's what I'm gonna be looking for. The problem is what we've done now is we've passed a plan that, believe me, you've got a whole lot of other people that are gonna expect every single thing in here to get passed. Now, everything in this plan, nothing in this plan is passed. It's just a plan. It's just words on a paper. That's all this is. Everything in here will have to be individually passed by ordinance in front of the council. We still have 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. As long as the 3 Republicans stay steadfast on this, then the mayor could veto any of the unreasonable things that's in here and won't have the 5th vote to override her veto. So that's why it was, and I want to thank half the people in this room as I look around who volunteered for my campaign, because if I would have lost, then Jean, her vetoes wouldn't have mattered. The council could have overrode any of her vetoes. So thank you all for helping me keep things like rent control from getting passed in the city of Omaha. So I just kind of gave that quick overview on affordable housing. There's so much that I'd want to say, but I also know you want to get into Streetcar. We got 3 questions. We'll start here.
Hi, thank you for coming today. My name is Gus Dvorak. I've been a landlord for 18 years, and I've seen this landscape change. What's about to happen, and I sit quietly with certain other real estate situations, and I can tell you that there's at least 6 other landlords I know of, and we're actively going to buy property outside of Douglas County. Mm-hmm. And the reason is, and thank you for your good efforts, but you're outgunned, you're outnumbered, and when the city hands out almost $300 million in TIF money, they don't even tell you what's really going on. Taxes are going up. Affordable housing, it's a myth the way it is now. A for effort. And like they say, they're not making any more land. So the housing you have here, my last point, is the code department needs to value us as landlords. They do not. They need to work with us to repair our properties, be good with us, so we can be good with citizens. So,
Well, thank you for being a good landlord. Wow. We had some bad landlords in that show just with Legacy Crossing. We don't need to get into that, but when you have 17 buildings that have to be condemned because they could go up in flames or anybody could be electrocuted at any moment. We've got this many of the landlords are bad landlords and this many are good. And unfortunately,
we're all being punished.
You are all being punished. I would agree with that. There was another question.
Yeah. You mentioned the 4 things that you were against in the 147 pages.
And now you're challenging me. I left my notes. I left my notes on what the other 2 were.
No, my challenge to you is, what are some of the good things in the 147 pages?
I think the code changes to make it more affordable for landlords and developers to build more housing. That's what we need to look at. We need to look at bringing the costs down. Increasing maybe some of the funds that NYFA has for maybe lower income to be able to afford to purchase a house and make the mortgages more affordable. And by the way, then when the money gets paid back in, it's sustainable, right? It's so they borrow money, they're paying it back. That's more money to then loan to somebody else. So having some of those loan programs, where they're loan programs, they're not giveaway. They're mortgages. So just being able to maybe have people who couldn't qualify for a mortgage. I have a lot of, my other job as a lawyer is I'm a family law attorney. And I have to tell you, in some of the divorces, one spouse may cause the other spouse's credit to go down where they were really responsible, but the other spouse wasn't. Or the other spouse was supposed to pay things off and they didn't, and their credit got destroyed. There are good people who will pay their mortgages, but their credit score doesn't necessarily reflect it. So I think when they're looked at, I think that's a great program. So that's 2 examples of what's in here. And there'd be a lot more that goes into that. But those are the things that I think are positive. A lot of code changes, electrical, plumbing. It's a lot of those codes that we're finding that we hear from the builders that are unreasonable and different. And I think we need to make sure, what I would like to see is the same code used in Sarpy County, Douglas County, so you're not having to look at various codes based upon, like I said, what side of the street you're building on. There was another question.
Okay, so I've been before the city planning board 3
Yes.
times, and I've been successful each of the 3 times.
Congratulations.
But it's been spread over since 2000 was the first time I went to the forum.
Okay.
But each time that I went, and I think most recently was probably 2018.
Okay.
I sit there and you listen to all these things, and it's all like, there's going to be this building built. This is what it's going to do for the community. And we're going to have tax increment financing. Everything they freaking do is tied to tax increment financing.
Well, east of 72nd, yes. There is no TIF west. No one qualifies for TIF west.
I don't disagree with you. But east of 72nd,
East of 72nd,
that's
yes.
a huge population base.
Yes.
I wanna know, like, how does the city planning board feel about what you're requesting? And I mean, let me just give you one quick example, and then I'll shut up and talk. So, probably 40 years ago, I had 3 well-to-do students from Creighton University, 4 well-to-do students from Creighton University working for me. And they lived in the Orpheum Apartments, and they invited me up to see their digs, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to afford it, except that we lied, and we got in here because we're poor students. And it's like, how did this get built and everything? And when I looked into it, it was TIF money. It's like, for the love of God, they lived in what, the last.
TIF wouldn't have anything to do with their rent.
Well, but they got in because of affordable housing.
Okay, they must have, if they lied, so what they do now is you
They
get
lied.
vouchers.
Of course they lied, but
Yeah,
still.
I just want to say that the TIF had nothing to do with, those are 2 separate issues. They must have lied somehow and gotten, because we don't build Section 8 housing anymore, they do vouchers. So you get a voucher, and your voucher amount depends upon how much you make. So as your income goes up, your voucher amount may go down, but then you can use your voucher as long as the landlord accepts vouchers. They're not, that was it. Now I remember the other 2 things that went in there. They were gonna require that if you use TIF, that a certain percentage of your apartments had to be affordable housing, had to be lower than, which would be lower than market rate. Brinker Harding says that actually would be counterproductive to increasing the number of units that we have. And I agreed with him wholeheartedly that we shouldn't be putting that requirement on there, because again, it would be counterproductive. So that just reminded me of another one.
And every time I've gone, I said, like 3 times I've been successful against the planning board. Each time meant that I had to go there for every 30 days for like 6 months. And so every 30 days for 6 months, because they postponed it then. Well,
I was going to say that you shouldn't have to go every 30 days.
The people that are going to do this, their representative couldn't make it today. There's always something that extends it out. So in those 3 times, I want you to understand, I probably have 18 times of sitting through their long meetings, and it's kind of like they just decide what they're going to do, and then the city attorney that moderates them or whatever, I can't think of the proper word, just rubber stamps it, and
Well, the city attorney is just there to answer questions. The city attorney doesn't have any say on the votes or anything.
Right, but as long as
They're just there making sure Robert's rules of order are followed.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that, but anyway. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, any other questions?
I've got.
Oh, yeah.
So, just having 2 kids who bought houses, looking at what they went through and the prices of houses now,
Right.
and what the market is saying those are worth, how is this plan going to bring the price of those houses down? Or, like when I first was buying a house, you always went to like a benchmark or a celebrity because it was a
Right.
newer house you could get into, a smaller lots and all that. But those now are even, you have people paying premium for those.
Right.
So,
Well, and actually, those aren't being built. In this plan is a lot of data. You'd probably be interested in the data, because a lot of it, you can't do a plan unless you have the information. So it's full of data, and one of the things in here was that Celebrity used to build, I don't know, I can't remember the exact, but it was like 100 units or 100 houses,
Yeah.
Per year, or something like that, 100 or 200, and now they're building like 10. I mean, they literally have been cut. Like, they're building 10% of what they used to build. Why? Well, right now, the cost of materials, shipping, everything else has gone up in construction. Our plan can't control the market. This plan and the city council wouldn't have any way to control the housing market or the cost of materials or construction or anything.
So how is that going to make things more affordable for people?
The only thing that we could do to make it more affordable to build is for those builders. I mean, if I can change some of the codes to make it less expensive, make it less onerous to get your permits, because what we're hearing from developers, it's the cost that we have to pay the city or the costs that go into what the city is requiring per code increases our cost by this much. We could decrease their cost, their building cost, by a certain percentage if we were to relook at our codes and also make the permitting process. You know, sometimes they get delayed because the code inspectors can't get out there. That's all. I mean, really, we're pretty limited in what the city can do cost-wise, but those are examples of what we can do to reduce the cost. The rest is out of our, the rest is out of our control. But what we want to do is encourage Celebrity to go back to building the number of units they used to build, because and hopefully reduce some of their costs so that those aren't, as expensive. Go back to where it was an affordable house for a first-time home buyer.
Is affordable housing only east of 72nd, or does it cover the whole?
No, that says the whole city. I mean, we want affordable housing everywhere. Changing some of the zoning codes that we have too, would be a lot more. I mean, if somebody wants to build like an ADU under their house, now that wouldn't work in all neighborhoods, so you still have to look at the zoning individually by where it is, but maybe making that easier if I want to build my mom a little place, next to my house, and it works in the zoning that I'm in, but I just maybe need to rezone from R4 to R5, but it's not affecting any of the neighbors. I mean, it's kind of some of those common sense things that we would want to do.
Is this affordable housing plan in compliance with the federal Obama, Biden, where if you were building a development such as the Lake City out the end of Dodge, that they would have to set aside a certain portion of that development for affordable or low income housing?
They somewhat addressed it, but they did that through TIF.
They did? Okay.
They did it, so it's just TIF. So actually that wouldn't apply west of 72nd, because if you're not using TIF, so they only addressed it in regards to anyone who's using TIF for building, that they would have to have a percentage. Again, nothing in this plan is passed.
Yeah.
So these are just all, it's a wish list of things. And it didn't really need to be in compliance with anything other than the state statute, which just required that we had a plan. So that's what we did. All right. And I'm more than happy to continue to discuss the affordable action plan, because I really hate talking about the streetcar, but I will. But I think what I heard is the majority of the people in the room want to talk about the streetcar. So if it's okay, anybody that has additional comments or questions on affordable housing, did you have one more?
Well, first I want to comment. I think on our kids buying a house, they've got a lot different expectations than we did when we were their age. We moved into this little house that we can afford that was $25,000, and I agree with you that the prices are really up. But they're in their heads, they deserve the best. And so if they have to pay
I had one of each.
Yeah, they have $600,000 for a house, and maybe they can afford it.
That's true.
I'm going through this right now.
It's been my complaint for years.
And I'm like, what if you lose that great job? And the wife says, well, they will move. I'm like,
Yeah, well, millennials do think a lot different than we do, that's for sure.
And then I have a question. Is there anything in the plan? I've never heard Mayor Stothert or anybody talk about affordable housing specific for seniors. Because
Yes.
I know in
And
other
that's
cities,
that's actually specifically in here. They address it for seniors. Again, it's how do we reduce the costs to build the housing for seniors, and it would span all of it, not the assisted living, but independent living,
Right.
and in places where they can walk.
there's
so-
so many different things that other cities are doing.
Yes,
like
the
with
ADUs were one of them.
Co-sharing,
Correct.
housing, and
Yes.
all of that type of thing that I've never heard anybody talk about.
And that's specifically in here. There's a whole section in here on the senior housing. I didn't mention it. I'm glad you brought it up.
Do you have somebody that is heading that part up?
Well, I mean, the whole plan, this is all just a plan. Yeah, and I think a lot of what we'll do will help affect that, but we do address that, and that's one of the specific things
Is
we're
the
addressing.
plan favorable?
Okay. I do. I'm watching my time. Sorry. So
Keep that in mind. She's a lawyer, she's a partner in the case.
Time is money.
I got a small trial at 2:00. The other guy's pro se. I'm hoping I don't lose against a self-represented litigant, but it won't help if I'm late to court. So, all right. So, if you want, we're gonna go into the streetcar. Any other comments on affordable housing? Please feel free to call me or email me. You know, I like to talk on the phone more than I like to do email. Please feel free to call me. We can get more accomplished that way. So, the streetcar. So, the streetcar was first talked about in Omaha around the year 1998. And my good friend Hal Dobb was the one that really started that conversation, kind of in conjunction with the CHI Center, and really trying to figure out a way to rebuild and revitalize our urban core. So that's how long we've been talking about the streetcar. When I got on the city council in 2013, so it's been 9 years, almost 10, actually, we're gonna go on 10. 10 years ago, one of the first meetings I had was with one of the developers who had a whole streetcar plan, you know? And so I was like, hey, not interested. Like, I mean, the answer is no. I love your pretty pictures. I love what you want to do, but no taxpayer dollars. No taxpayer dollars for a streetcar. And I want to say over the last 10 years, I've had at least 5 different plans come in front of me where they wanted the streetcar. And I maintained no taxpayer dollars for the streetcar. I challenged them. Find a way. You want to build your streetcar? I actually think they're fun. I've used them in other cities. I love when I can stay at a hotel, take the streetcar to the Walgreens when I need something, don't have to Uber. I like the streetcar. Okay? I think it's great, but not on the taxpayer dime. Kansas City passed bonds. I mean, their property taxes, literally they voted to increase their property taxes to build their streetcar. It's done a lot of good, but it was an increase in taxes. And I said, no taxpayer dollar. And it's not even taxpayer, I don't even want taxpayer money used, even if we can do it without raising taxes. I mean, my whole thing was, if you can figure out how to pay for it, then I challenge you to do that. I think it will increase development. I think it will help revitalize our downtown. But I said, no taxpayer money. Well, and by the way, I actually debated Hal Dobb. I don't know if any of you were there. It was 2017, May of 2017. I debated Hal Dobb at the Masons, the Scottish Masons Center. There were at least 120 people there. Hal Dobb was for the streetcar. He showed up with his whole table, and he had like a whole Lego demonstration with buildings and streetcar. I mean, his whole table was great. I just came with my briefcase, so I just pulled out the Constitution and a $20 bill, and those are my props. I happen to have I carry a pocket Constitution. So those are my props. But we debated for well over an hour, and I was against the streetcar. And Hal was for it. And I mean, I think we had a great exchange of, it was just, I didn't believe that it's worth the taxpayer dollar to do it. And my opinion was, if you're going to use the taxpayer dollar to go to vote with the people, I think that's the one thing that Hal and I agreed on, if you're using taxpayer dollars. So now we'll fast forward. Mutual of Omaha wants to build a new skyscraper. That's great for Omaha. We want that skyscraper. It'll really help downtown Omaha. Love it. Of course we want another skyscraper. First National Bank has been great. And by the way, they use TIF. It came back online. I just want to let you know that we're getting 15 million more on average per year from TIF projects that are now coming back, and we're getting all those increased taxes from the property values. And First National came back on 2 years ago. So that's great for downtown. They wanted the streetcar, right? Okay, well, I'm still not for it if the taxpayers have to pay for it. Well, we've got a whole plan. Aimee, by the way, they said, we heard you. You've repeated it over and over and over. And so what they came up with is they're using $360 million in redevelopment bonds. The important thing about redevelopment bonds, and by the way, I didn't know that we had redevelopment bonds. I've been on the council at 9 years by the time I heard of this. I'm like, we have bonds that aren't backed by the taxpayer? Those exist? I didn't know that. So you'd think at this point I would actually know everything, but yeah, I'm still learning something every day. Redevelopment bonds are actually purchased by investors. If it goes under, the investors are the ones that lose their money. The taxpayers of the city of Omaha do not back redevelopment bonds. So it's going to require investors to purchase those bonds. And we've got investors. I think Mutual of Omaha is going to be one of the biggest buyers, I'm guessing, of those bonds. So $360 million is not backed by the taxpayer. We're issuing the bonds, but they're not backed by us. And I know, I kind of had the same look you did, by the way. Like, really? But that's how redevelopment bonds worked. And the investors know this. I mean, the investors know it going in. They're purchasing the bonds. They're counting on the development to get paid back. What we also did is we had Municap come in. They're a national firm. They have no stake in this because we had a report from HDR. And I love HDR. I trust HDR. I think they're one of the best companies in the world. But it's hard. I didn't think it was right for the taxpayers, for my constituents, if I relied on a report where there's somebody that may benefit from the building of it, right? Because they're a great company. I'm sure they're going to bid on it, and I would rather see HDR do the design because they do good work. But then you can't rely on a report from them and call it completely unbiased. So I wanted an unbiased report of how much development the streetcar would actually bring. And also the bond, the people who are going to purchase these bonds, they're not going to purchase them unless there's a Municap rating. They kind of work like Moody's or S&P. They'll give a rating to the bonds that are going out on the market. So to them, that's their credibility. So if they rate something high and it's not high, I mean, they'll lose their credibility in the marketplace, and they're a nationwide company. So we had Municap come in and do a study, and I mean, I think we hired them in April. I want to say it was April, and somewhere March, April of last year in the spring. We just got the report in November. I mean, they did spend a lot of time and went through all the data. And what they said is there needs to be $160 million, and that's they're very conservative. They were actually lower than what HDR said. $160 million in development for those bonds to be good. Well, we've averaged $160 million in downtown Omaha over the last 10 years without the streetcar. So that was a really good rating, meaning those bonds looked very good. And by the way, the streetcar won't go if those bonds aren't purchased, because then there'll be no money to pay for it. So all we've done is allow them to issue the bonds. They still have to be purchased by investors. There was still an $80 million shortfall for those. So Jane Stothert offered lease purchase bonds. Those bonds are going to be paid for through the TIF dollars from all of the development. Whether you like TIF or not, TIF is here and we use it. And I'll be honest, I was kind of an anti-TIF person. It's hard to say would it be built but for TIF? And sorry, Mike Kennedy's calling me. Should I answer and say, why aren't you here at the lunch? Okay. I'm gonna let him know he interrupted my speech. So those $80 million, although would be backed by taxpayers, the only way those fail is if there is no development. That there is no development, because the TIF loan will pay that $80 million back. And with only $160 million needed to pay basically those loans back, Mutual of Omaha is investing $1 billion. So the Mutual of Omaha building in and of itself will cover the cost of those. So although it's 0.001% that we would have to pay for a portion of that $80 million, it's virtually impossible according to the Municap report. So the streetcar is literally being built by development money. And a lot of people don't I should give my TIF 101. The developers pay the full amount of taxes. They pay the increased amount. So when you build a building on, the land was $100,000, after you build, now you've got $1 million assessment. They're paying taxes on the $1 million. What it is they take out a loan to pay for certain aspects of that, half of which are actually public. They have to redo roads and everything that we would have otherwise had to pay for. They're paying for the public roads and the roads that they have to widen, street lights, all of those things. What happens is they pay their taxes into the county. The county then sends the money to pay the loan off until that loan's paid off. And then the county gets to keep it after that. So now what we have is all of this development that used TIF starting 20 years ago, they're all now coming back online year after year. So at this point in time, we're now getting the increased value of those taxes, like First National Bank, at around 15 million per year. Now we're then letting other developers do the same thing, but theirs are coming back online every year. So that's where we needed to get to in order to have TIF actually balance itself out, and we finally have gotten there. So that's how that 80 million is going to be paid for. So as long as Mutual of Omaha builds, their TIF dollars will pay the 80 million for the lease purchase bonds. Now, to pay for the maintenance of the streetcar, right? We're not forgetting, by the way, we're not forgetting anything. And I have to tell you, Brinker Harding, Don Rowe, and I have spent months, and we read everything. I can't tell you that I understand everything in that Municap report. I'm a lawyer, so, I try. But between the three of us, we really have an exchange. Okay, well, how's it going to be paid for? Are we going to be stuck with the 6 to 7 million per year on the maintenance and running of the streetcar? Because it's going to be free. We have what's called an enterprise fund. So one of the things that Mutual of Omaha is doing is we've got a parking garage going down there. They're building it, the city will then own it, and then we get all of the money from the parking garages. We have parking garages all over everything's east of 72nd, I know, but all over east of 72nd. That enterprise fund, all the revenues go into the enterprise fund. It can only be used for transportation. That's it. We can't use it to fix our roads. We can't use it for parks. We can't throw it in the general fund. We can't pay off pensions. None of it. It has to be used just for transportation. So that enterprise fund, with the amount of revenue that we will generate from our parking garages, which is going to include the Mutual of Omaha, both at Midtown Crossing and downtown, that will pay for the maintenance of it. So they came to me with a plan that I kept trying to poke holes in, by the way, on everything. We have the one issue with MUD, but I thought MUD, and they're friends of mine, by the way, the two lawyers there I went to law school with them. We were baby attorneys together. We grew up together. I like them. But I think they did a disservice by coming out. What they were trying to do was get a leg up in the negotiating process with Gene, and they got mad, and they said, we're going to council and telling everybody their MUD rates are going up because of the streetcar. Which, by the way, they raised the rates before we even voted on the bonds. They just got all excited because they're like, oh, great, we're going to raise the rates anyway. Now we can just blame the city of Omaha. And look back. They have $5 million already in savings as capital improvement because all of the mains, the water mains, except the ones for the new buildings, they're over 100 years old. So you see water main breaks all over, again, east of 72nd. There were 75 last year. Why? Because the water mains are over 100 years old. They all have to be replaced. You can't have water mains that are 150 years old. So they have $5 million in their CIP to replace those mains. Well, that $5 million, when they replace a main, they have to hire somebody to dig up the road, replace the main, and then replace the road. The majority of the cost in that is the labor and the road damage, that infrastructure that you have to pull up and replace. What we said is the project will pay for ripping up all the roads, all that labor. The project's going to have to pay for that because they're doing it anyway with putting the lines in. MUD, we just want you to put the new mains in, which have to be replaced anyway. The initial report was that it was going to come to about $7 million. That's what HDR did. They have $5 million in there anyway. I think they're negotiating, so who pays the extra $2? Okay, well, the project should probably pay it. I don't want to get into negotiations between MUD and Omaha, but they don't have to increase your rates. And I do think the project, they should be required to pay for the movement of any new ones that MUD already paid for. Absolutely. But then we just need to work on, all right, what's the cost share in you putting in the new water mains that you have to put in anyway, and the project pays for the rest. So I think literally at this point, there's about $5 million that they're arguing about. It's and I know $5 million is a lot to us individually, but when it comes to the MUD budget or the budget of the streetcar project, I would say it's minimal and would not increase rates at all. But they're going to have to come up with an in-between of who's going to pay that. And Mayor Stothard has actually absolutely given her word She is not going to agree to anything that would increase the MUD rates. Now, they're going to increase your rates because they always do, but we don't want it to be because of this project. So, whew. Okay.
Well said.
Now that I kind of went through that, I left 15 minutes for questions, and I will have to do a hard cutoff because I don't want Judge Stratman to get mad at me.
When Hal Dobb first said he was in favor of Streetcar, he proposed that it go to Creighton and then to 24th and Lake. How many other routes are we going to be exposed to?
So this route is going to go from 10th. Oh, okay, the statement, which I'm not aware of, so I'm going to take your word for it, Lee. Lee says that Hal Dobbs' initial streetcar proposal was to go from Creighton to 24th and Lake. Okay, so I didn't know that.
I thought it was Rosenthal. Years ago, they wanted.
You know what? I unfortunately I don't know what Hal's original plan was.
Well, are there other plants in the plan?
No, at this point, what it is, it's going to go from 10th Street to 42nd to UNMC, and then there's going to be a line that goes off on 10th. It's going to go from that riverfront to CHI, and not Rosenblatt, Charles Schwab, the new Rosenblatt. and so they do have a phase 2. Here's my deal, which they want to go to the zoo and to the airport, but in my opinion, and this is what I suggested early on, by the way, I voted no on forming the streetcar. I didn't vote yes on anything in regards to this until I got the Municap report back. So I was a no vote on that. I'm fairly certain I'll be a no vote on expanding rails in the ground streetcar. What I suggested they look at, my father used to work for Valmont Industry. He retired from Valmont Industries. And I spoke to the president of Valmont, who actually works with a company called Hess in Switzerland. And they're one of the leading streetcar manufacturers in the world. And what a lot of the cities in Asia, the Netherlands, and some of the European countries are doing, they have what look like streetcars, but they're rubber tires, streetcars, so you don't have to dig up the road. And so I asked Jane Ottle on the floor if you could please look at this. Now, they're not ready at this point for the streetcar that we're currently doing, but they have permanent charging stations. So you have the permanent infrastructure that I know the developers say you have to have in order to increase the development. That's why they want the rails in the ground, because they say you won't get the additional development unless the developers know that it's permanently going to be there. If you have the rubber tires, it could just move and go away. But you have to build the permanent charging stations, so I guess it's somewhat in between. So that's kind of what I'm proposing, and if we were going to do it from the zoo to the airport, I would propose using the rubber car with charging stations because we could do it faster and cheaper. And in my opinion, I'm not so sure that going all the way to the airport or to the zoo is going to increase the amount of development to the point that it would pay for itself if we used the permanent metal rails in the ground, right? I mean, I see it, the development from UNMC to 10th Street and doing that whole loop around Farm and Harney. I see that. That's the urban core. When you start doing the arms out, I don't know if it'd be able to pay for itself. So again, that's phase 2, but I think they have way too much. I think phase 2 is kind of a pipe dream right now, unless they want to start looking at the rubber tire with the charging station, which I think would be great. I think it'd be great for our city if we had that. And by the way, people who ride streetcars don't necessarily ride buses. I don't see the streetcar as a mode of transportation. I don't compare it to Orbit or our buses. I have to tell you, I would be one of those. I'll hop on a streetcar any day because it just comes every 10 minutes. You know that at least within 10 minutes, I'm just going to hop on, I'm going to go where I want to go, and I can hop back on it. For a bus, I got to get a schedule, and I have to figure out which bus is which, and I have to look at the line, and am I on the right bus? I'm not doing that, right? I'll just call an Uber. But I will ride the streetcar. So what the streetcar does is it's an urban circulator to take people within, 10 minutes you can catch it, and it's constantly going, and it's on the same route. It's an economic development tool. It is, in my opinion, there will be people that use it for transportation, yes. But unlike buses, the main purpose of buses is to transport people. This is really to circulate people so that we don't have to have as many parking garages and parking surfaces in our downtown. We can build on those parking surfaces. So you can park at a garage and then ride it to where you want to go, and you don't have to walk. I don't know if I don't even remember what the question was that I answered at this point.
Aimee, thanks for being here. You've answered some of my question, but I just want to underscore that, well, one, I'm in favor of the streetcar idea. I am not in favor of rails for all kinds of reasons, and one has to do with ice and snow and the rails, another has to do with bicycles and the killing people and what to do. Margaret said something about what if a car stalls in the lane? Does the streetcar system stop until it's?
Yeah.
Why isn't a rubber tire solution just a way better solution than the rails? And
well, I thought it was. And by the way, I proposed it 3 times at 3 different council meetings with Jay Noddle on the floor. So, and Warren Buffett never contacted me. But yet he did an article in the paper like it was his idea. Anyway, but that's been my proposal. I will maintain it. That's not what everybody else wants, and so basically I've been shot down. I will continue. I think that is the best way. And by the way, the poles for the charging stations, they are built by Valmont. They're one of the companies that does it. And my father doesn't work there anymore, so I'm not saying this because my dad would make any more money. But what I'm saying is it's local. I mean, it would be a company in Valley that we'd be supporting our own economy by having somebody that manufactured. They don't manufacture the streetcars. It's the polling, the infrastructure that helps charge them. Gerald.
Hey, and thank you for hosting this forum. My question is, what is who appoints the authority for the streetcar?
Okay.
And
Who appoints the authority for the streetcar and?
And what's going to stop MUD and OPPD from raising the rates for all of the new streetcar, the energy that is going to be going into the streetcar?
And then Gerald's second part of his question was, how are we going to stop MUD and OPPD from raising rates? Well, Mayor Stothert appoints the streetcar authority. The streetcar authority, and now I can't remember, I think she has Bob Stubbe, our Director of Public Works, Steve Curtis, who's finance, our finance director, Jay Noddle, is chairing it. He's a developer. I think, I can't remember if Brinker Harding's there, if he just goes to every meeting and reports. I gotta give it to Brinker. He keeps on top of the streetcar and reports back. So they are appointed by the mayor for the streetcar authority. And we have to have a separate streetcar authority. It's mandated by state law. So it can't be the city council. We have to have a separate authority. Now, everything that happens has to be voted on by city council, but we have a separate authority. I like who Gene has picked. In regards to the rates, the mayor and the streetcar authority, which would be the developers and the people, Omaha Finance, Steve Curtis, who I think is one of the best finance directors we've ever had. Yeah, let him know he owes me lunch again, for me saying that. But Steve Curtis he cares about the taxpayers and our budget and what we're paying for, and he doesn't want to pay $1 that he doesn't have to pay, and he will fight it. And we currently we have issues with MUD that they owe us money that they're not paying. I'm not going to get into that at this point, but I can tell you Steve Curtis will fight for every taxpayer, and he's done a great job doing that for the last 10 years. So, and I was chair of the finance committee for 6 years. So I can say that he is actually very good at watching out for your money, and that's how he thinks of it. It's your money and not his. But they're negotiating. OPPD and the city and the project, I believe, have already worked it out. It's not a big increase in costs for OPPD, and I believe the infrastructure that they're replacing, they needed to replace anyway, so I think they had it in their CIP. So there was no discussion, at least with OPPD, that there'd be any increase in rates. And again, we're negotiating Gene Stothard, the project, and MUD is continuing negotiations. I heard it's going well. That can change on a dime, but I do have every confidence in the mayor that she will be able to negotiate that. And, you know, the project's probably going to have to pay a little more, and MUD is probably going to have to pay a little more, but I don't think it'd be anything that would have to raise rates. Nancy?
So what's the next step? You know, the city council approved this.
Well, so, and what was surprising is that, the vote was, we had the vote on December 13th for the bonds. So that vote was already passed. And I've been getting emails all Christmas that says vote no on the streetcar. Well, we literally have had, I think, 5 votes on the streetcar. We reformed the authority. We approved the agreement. The next step is Mutual of Omaha. We've already approved their agreement. Mutual required the bonds to be passed because of what interest rates were doing. If we were to delay a vote on the bond, it would have hurt the project because of the way interest rates were going. We really needed to get them out for the project to keep those costs down so they could get better interest rates on the debt service. And so that vote occurred on December 13th. So at this point, it's moving forward unless Mutual of Omaha somehow decides we're not building our tower. If Mutual quits and says no, everything's done. As long as Mutual builds, and we've already passed the agreement with Mutual of Omaha, we already had all those votes. And so right now, the next step is really on Mutual and the Streetcar Authority, because I would say the train has already left the station, but maybe I'll just say the streetcar has already left the charging station.
Two questions. One, is Matt involved in this in any way? And two, because I have a extensive history with the people who work at the Med Center, why doesn't it go as far as the new administrative building, which will be 16 stories at the medical center? And it's going to have a lot of people that work there.
Well, it's going to 42nd. I have to tell you, it's still in the design phase, so exactly where it's going and where the loop is going around at UNMC, I think they're still determining, because they couldn't start the design phase of this until there was actually money to pay for it. So a lot of those questions are kind of to be determined, and that's what will be decided by the streetcar. So it's in design right now. So it could go down there. I know with Next and what's going on with the building at UNMC, there may be some changes based upon the new development at UNMC. I can tell you that Dr. Gold will be working, hand in hand. And in fact, UNMC, because they don't have TIF, but they are going to contribute to the cost. We worked out an agreement with them, because obviously they don't pay property taxes, but we worked out an agreement with, they're doing a cost share as well.
And then what about Matt? Are they involved in this at all?
No, the Streetcar Authority, that's part of what Matt is, because when you have a transportation, but they're completely separate. The Streetcar Authority will make all of the decisions. It's just under kind of that Metro, they're part of that, but I don't think anybody on Metro is on the Streetcar Authority. There may be somebody from Matt on there, but they really have nothing to do with the streetcar. Other than they got to work together with the bus routes, and they're going to have to reroute some of their buses. We're not going to have Orbit, follow the same route as the streetcar, because that would be counterproductive. But I think from where the streetcar stops, we'll work with Matt on trying to get them to maybe change some of where their stops are to make it more convenient for people who are coming in from North and South Omaha to take a bus to where the streetcar is. So it would be more of just working with them, but they won't have any control. Susan.
I just want to say thank you that you're in my district. Thank you for all the hard work and research you put into everything you do. You are excellent, you're fabulous, and I love you dearly.
Oh my gosh, Susan, thank you. Thank you, Susan. She's my favorite constituent. Don't tell my parents.
What's the truth versus rumor in terms of Mutual Omaha is building this tower on 14th Street where the old library is?
Right.
What's the truth as far as the future of 2 more skyscrapers by them in their international development deal that they've got going on?
I'm gonna say that I sometimes you know information that is proprietary that you really can't give out, and I can't remember where my confidentiality lies, and as a lawyer I don't want to give it. But what I can tell you is there is land right around there that I believe is going to be developed. Some big development is going to come around Mutual of Omaha. I'll kind of leave it at that because nothing's set in stone, nothing's been released or anything else.
The second part to my question was, to your understanding, who owns Midtown? Mutual of Omaha built it, but they are not the owners, or are they the owners?
I believe Mutual of Omaha is the owners, but I believe they have a buyer.
And it's from a group in Europe, perhaps?
I don't know anything about that private contract. That wouldn't require any city council approval.
No.
So sometimes I just get information from one of my counterparts that's in commercial real estate who gets information that, he shares.
And this is enterprise. I mean, hey, it's a great
Right. Now, you know what I have to say is whether we agree or disagree, if you live in West Omaha and you will never ride the streetcar ever, if we have a thriving urban downtown, it's going to benefit the whole city. It benefits you because we increase the amount of property taxes we have, we expand our tax base, and hopefully, with the help of some of our state senators, we can bring our property taxes down and still be able to pay for all of our necessities. I know we're putting a lot of stake in there, but I'd like to end my hour very hopeful. So I want to thanks everybody. Thank you again, Dee Dee. I really appreciate all of you. Did you hear everything? Sorry, Susan. You're tied with Lee Terry as my favorite constituent. It's just that Lee, she never complains. I love you all. Thank you.
Thank you.